So there's a lot of conversation always about why people have children because, of course, they're joyful, they grow your family. There's not as much conversation about why people do not have children. And all of those decisions are very personal. I'm Marcy Marcus. On the podcast today. We're going to do a little bit of a look at a series we've been doing on CBC. This is Manitoba. So we're going to hear from some Manitoba women about their decisions to go childless and child-free and what that was like. But we want to start with the statistics. I know numbers sound dry and boring, but in this case, they're really interesting. And the reasons behind them are even more interesting. So Statistics Canada says in this country, the fertility rate is the lowest that it's ever been. The fertility rate's been at 1.26 children born per woman for 2 years in a row. Manitoba's numbers, in case you're wondering about where we live, they're sitting just above average. They're at about 1.52. But that is still way below something called the replacement rate. You might be going, what does that mean? We're going to find out. So Nora Galbraith is the first person we hear from on the pod today. She's a senior analyst from the Centre for Demography at Statistics Canada, and she's got a breakdown of all these numbers. Hi, Nora.
Good morning, Marcy. Nice to be here in Ottawa, where we just have some freezing rain.
Yeah.
Not minus 40.
Come visit sometime. It's pretty.
Yeah.
It's just cold. Tell us more about the numbers. Like, what do they say to you overall before we dig in here?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, Canada's fertility rate reached a new record low last year of 1.26 children per woman. That wasn't a big surprise, as it has been generally decreasing for a number of decades now. And we also see, on an international level, that's happening in most countries. Most high-income countries are seeing the same trend. But that said, there were a few things that happened in the last year of data that were particularly special. One of those is the rate or the magnitude of decrease that we're seeing. So the level of year-over-year decreases that we've seen in the last couple of years, we really haven't seen in about 50 years in Canada. The last time we had this sort of rapid pace of decrease was back in the so-called baby bust years, the late 1960s, early 70s, following the baby boom. And the reason that we're having this more rapid year-over-year decreases is because we're seeing fertility decrease kind of uniformly across all age groups of women. Again, that's something that's quite rare historically. Again, last time we saw it was during the baby bust period. So for some time now, there's been a trend of lower fertility rates for younger women and increasing fertility rates for women in their 30s and early 40s. But in 2023, there was a uniform across-the-board decrease.
I want to interject and just ask you about Manitoba because, as I mentioned, our fertility rate here is a bit higher than the national average. As we dig into discussing concerns, is it high enough for us not to be concerned, or are we sort of lumped into sort of what we're about to analyze? Because 1.26 children is the average. We're just at 1.52.
Right. So Manitoba has been pretty consistently higher than the national average for some time now. It was actually second highest among the provinces just after Saskatchewan in 2023. And the reason that Manitoba's fertility rate tends to be higher than the national average is because they have stronger fertility rates among younger women. So women in their 20s, early 30s, Manitoba has relatively high fertility rates compared to other parts of the country. And also, when we look at teenage fertility rates, Manitoba had the third highest teenage fertility rate in the country in 2023 after Nunavut and Saskatchewan. So.
In the introduction, we mentioned that the numbers we're talking about are below the replacement rate, especially that national number. Can we explain to listeners what the replacement rate is?
Yes. So this is sort of a theoretical threshold that demographers have come up with of 2.1 children per woman. So when fertility rates are at that level or higher, you can theoretically replace the population over a number of generations, because basically the two members of the mother and father replace themselves, plus a little extra to account for migration and mortality. So
That's what
Canada
the number
has
is.
been, Canada's been below that for about 5 decades now.
Can you elaborate a bit on you've sort of answered this in part as you were going through the stats, but about why the fertility rate is on a decline, what the thought is around why overall?
Yeah, so there's, I think, no one single factor that we can say is contributing to that. Generally, we know that with greater rates of post-secondary education, women having stronger labor force participation rates in recent decades, that tends to lead to people having their children at increasingly older ages. So we've seen that the average age of childbearing in Canada has been steadily increasing over time. And when you start giving birth at a later age, let's say in your mid-30s, it just becomes more difficult to have a really large family size, just simply due to the biological limits of childbearing. So that's one factor. But I think there's an endless list of reasons why or why not people want to have children or decide to have children. I think it's, as we reach these new sort of unprecedented low levels of fertility, it's definitely worth our interest in trying to dig into that and understand what are the main factors today that are driving that.
Yeah, we had a major brainstorm at the beginning of the thoughts of this series, just in our story meeting, and all these things started, why would you have one child versus, 2 children, and what about costs, and what about this, and like all kinds of things started coming to the forefront. So we have a lot of conversations to come. Given this, Canada, is also at the same time reducing the number of immigrants being allowed to settle here in this country. What could happen if we don't address this one way or the other?
Yeah, so when fertility rates are below that replacement level, in the absence of large influxes of international migrants to the country, eventually the population will begin to decrease. Now, as I said, Canada's been below that threshold for 5 decades, and we've been experiencing strong population growth because of international migration. It's the major contributor to our population's growth right now. So I think as levels currently are, we're in no danger of that. In contrast, in other G7 countries, such as Italy, that don't rely as much on international migration, they are beginning to grapple with the consequences of rapid population aging, population decrease, and everything that goes along with that, which can include, challenges in their labor market, a lot of stress and pressure on their public health care and pension systems, and so on.
Nora, thank you for starting our series by looking at these numbers. We really appreciate your time and analysis.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So as I mentioned, we were going to start with the numbers, but now let's turn to the people behind those statistics, because it's complicated when you're making the decision of whether or not to have children. For some people, it can be an easy one. For some, it's not a decision. Maybe it wasn't medically possible. For others, it's complicated by other factors. So Katelyn Sawatzky and Jill Ritchot are friends. They both made the decision to be child-free. Here's a conversation I had with them about it. 35-year-old Katelyn Sawatzky is in studio. Good morning.
Good morning.
And 37-year-old Jill Ritchot is also in studio. Good morning.
Good morning.
So you two are friends. Obviously, you're here. You both made the decision to be child-free. Katelyn, what prompted the decision? And I mean, I'm just curious, how old were you when you started thinking about it? I
would say around mid-20s. I was just kind of like, I thought, in the future, when I feel like it. And then I was kind of, okay, well, what if I never feel like it? And that started like a very intense anxiety spiral where it took me lots of, reflection and therapy and sorting out why I felt so stressed and internal judgment because of how we're raised. It's just assumed that women will have children and it's just like expected of you. And so it was just like a lot of anxiety. And then I realized, I just don't want kids. And that's okay. Yeah.
So the process of analyzing those feelings, as you said, what factors were you thinking about when you were thinking about what it would mean to have kids? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, for me, it just kind of felt like my life would totally change. And like there's a culture around parenthood in Canada, in North America, that's just very all-consuming. So it kind of felt like the end for me, the end of my life. And then it would all become about some little person, And like back in my day, you could just throw your kids out on the corner and like I just play and my mom would be like, come back for dinner. And it was like much more hands-off and there was a lot more support and financial security and stuff like that. And
you were weighing all that.
Yeah, I was weighing all of that. And the judgments women face with each other, like on social media now, it's like, breast is best. Well, what if you can't breastfeed? And like, there's all this judgment about every decision. And I was just like, you know what? I'm opting out.
This is the decision for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how about for you, Jill? What? Tell me a little bit about your journey to come to the decision.
Yeah, so for me, I kind of always knew. So even as a kid, there was part of me that just sort of deep down knew, I don't think parenthood and becoming a mother is going to be for me. And I did think, oh, maybe I'll change my mind because everyone kind of tells you that you're going to change your mind as you get older. And then similar to Katelyn, I just didn't. And as I got older and I sort of reflected more on this, like deep in my bones, knowing that it wasn't going to be the path for me, and I started to embrace that and realize that that was okay. It allowed me to just be child-free and realize that that's the best version of my life. I think of it a bit like maybe the same sort of feeling that some folks get knowing how they really want kids and they really want to be a mother. I think I had a similar feeling. It was just for the opposite.
Got it. How has the decision affected your life?
So for me, it's allowed me to fully be myself and embrace who I am. So I'm able to live a life that makes more sense to me. I like a lot of solitude. I'm very introverted. I like a quieter, slower life where I'm able to prioritize my friendships and doing things in the community, things of that nature. And I knew that if I had kids, that would have to shift and change. And I just didn't feel like that was going to be the best version of life for me.
And how has the decision affected your life, Katelyn? What's it been like?
Yeah, kind of a bit of the same. I also like my peace and quiet. And, for me, I just am happy with, my spouse, my friendships, the community that, we've created as child-free people is very important to me. And the relationship I have with like family and my dogs, very important to me. I just feel like I'm content, like nothing's missing. Like I don't feel that pull. I don't know. I don't have a maternal bone in my body except towards my dog.
What's the stigma like?
Because I work from home and I don't interact with like the public very much, I don't get the like, well, when are you having kids? Why? You'll change your mind and wait until you blah, whatever. I don't really get a lot of that. So I'm kind of sheltered from it. And I've structured my life with a lot of child-free people in it.
Got it. How about you, Jill? What would you say the common misconceptions or stigmas are around it?
I would say that I've had the range of reactions. So the idea that I'll change my mind. I actually had someone tell me once that I'll feel differently once I'm pregnant, which seemed like a interesting thing to say and not a theory I wanted to test. But so I've heard that. I've heard, it's a selfish decision, that I'll really regret it. I'll be alone when I'm old, those kinds of things.
A selfish decision because you didn't have children?
Yes.
What sense do you make of that?
I tend to not feel that the idea of selfishness is a helpful term when we talk about reproductive choice. And I think what's important for people to know about a lot of child-free folks is that it's not a decision that people make lightly. It's typically a decision that people make after a lot of self-reflection, a lot of time, and it's made more from self-awareness than it is from selfishness.
That's really well stated, I think. Do you get presumptions about why you made the decision ever? I'm a child-free person as well, so I find that people presume what my journey was, and there's very few people that know my personal story and how I came to it. And everyone everyone's is so different. So it's just interesting to me because people will say, oh, you chose to be this a career woman. Clearly that's what you did. And then I don't even engage in the conversation because people didn't need to know my story. But I'm wondering whether or not you face those sort of things, even though this is deeply personal, people seem to feel that they understand why you made the choice.
Yeah, I do sometimes get that, oh, are you really into your career? Like that I need to have one other thing
and you could be.
Of.
It's not a negative thing, but yeah.
Exactly. You could be. For me, that's not the case. But yeah, so you do get that. Sometimes people think that they know, not realizing the million different reasons that people make this choice.
Tell me a bit about the community that, Katelyn, you were referring to, of child-free people that have come together and what that you said that's meant a lot to you.
Yeah, well, a few years ago, I was just like woefully lonely, in the COVID era. And I was just like, there's got to be a way to connect with women. So I just went on meetup.com and I created a group like Child-Free Winnipeg Women. And people just started coming and we got like a great group and lots of people come repeatedly. And I've built a really great friend group from it. And it's really been amazing. Everyone's like, oh, thank goodness you made this group, because it was just like all my friends were having kids. And then I was kind of left in the dust because it makes sense. Mothers want to be friends with people with children. They want to be like-minded people. And so do we.
So you have a Substack too, Jill, where you talk about being child-free. Why did you start that specifically?
I started that because similar to what Katelyn was just talking about, I think there's a lot of people who maybe are thinking about this or have made that decision. And if you're not surrounded by other like-minded individuals, it can be a little bit isolating sometimes. And so I wanted to start the Substack to kind of put thoughts out there and try and reach other people who might be feeling some of the ways that I was when making that decision.
There's societal norms, right, that come with, as you said, I mean, people having children, and then there's all kinds of things that happen, that you aren't, naturally part of, right? You think about, Mother's Days or graduation for kids or things like, obviously, mat leave. Like, there's just different things that get discussed. But the other thing that happens is the baby shower. But I think this is interesting because you actually had a shower. Who threw a shower for you, Jill?
I did. Some of my wonderful friends did. It started as a joke. I made an offhanded comment to a friend of mine that, oh, I should have a no baby shower. And then she was like, that's amazing. And then multiple of my friends, both child having and child free, got together and threw me a shower. We had games and food. I had a registry. It was the most amazing day. It meant so much to me. It was this wonderful celebration of love and community and friendship. It was amazing.
What would you say, Katelyn, to someone who's listening who's struggling with the decision, whether or not you have some advice? Because, obviously you said that it took you some time for yourself. So I'm wondering what you would say to someone that might be standing in that moment.
It's really, really, really hard. I would say try to be kind to yourself. Give yourself time. Allow yourself the freedom to make the choice. And I just you're fine either way. Like, whether you make that decision or you're not, your life's going to be great. In both ways, you gain something. In both ways, you lose something. So just trying to make sense of what is the best decision for you. And don't listen to anybody else. Like your mom, if she's like, you give me a grandkid. Like, this is about you and your life and what you think will bring you fulfillment. So I think that's really all that matters. So
how about you, Jill? What would you say to someone if they're listening?
Very similar. I think it's about trying to quiet the noise that might be around you, because there's a lot that can be out there, and just really tune into yourself and what you feel like is going to be best for you.
How old were you when you were going through your decision-making process? Katelyn shared a little bit more, and I didn't really dig into that for you.
I always kind of knew since I was a kid, but I would have been in my later 20s and early 30s when I fully embraced that this was the right choice.
Have either of you come up against the narrative that somehow you're missing something about being a woman?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does that feel when that is put on you?
It doesn't feel good. It just says that there's only one way to be a woman. There's one valid life choice. It's, go to school, get married, get a house, have kids. And it's like, well, maybe that life script isn't for everyone. And we can all have valid choices that don't all look the same. And the fact that we even have a choice is not something I take for granted. Like, we didn't always have a choice what women could do, right? It was just have kids. So to still have that put on us, that there's only one way to do womanhood, look in the mirror when you think that, because what you're really saying is you resent that we have choices.
Just last, where can people find this group if they want to sign up and they're listening? Is it open to anyone or?
It's open to child-free
Obviously.
and childless people. So people who want kids, but for whatever reason they don't have them, welcome to join. And child-free people who've made that choice out of a positive decision for their lives. And it's on meetup.com.
Yeah.
So find us.
Thank you both for being here today and being so open with your own personal stories. Really appreciate you both. Thank you so much, Jill.
Thank you.
And thank you, Katelyn.
Thank you so much.
That's Jill Ritchot and Katelyn Sawatzky talking about their lives and decisions around being child-free. And if you want to check them out on social media, please do, because as mentioned, they connect in all kinds of different ways. While you're online checking it out, don't forget to follow and share if you're a fan of This Is Manitoba. And thanks for tuning in with us today.